Our teacher does not call us by our real names, but by our future potential. I have a teacher at school that teaches a variety of subjects, and he is generally well liked. The only strange thing about him is that he doesn't call any student by their real names, but by their future potential from his opinion. He comes in class and starts doing the register. Potential murderer teacher shouts out and Callum raises his hand as he knows it's him because the teacher always calls him by that name. Potential burglar teacher shouts out and Brian puts his hand up as he has been called that many times by the teacher. Potential psychopath teacher shouts out and Emily puts her hand up as she knows it's her because the teacher always calls her that. Potential cannibal. And I now put my hand up because he always calls me that. He has something for everyone from potential freak accident to potential evil genius. I admit it was fun at first, but now I just want him to call me by my real name, which is Joshua. On another day, our teacher starts doing the register, and as usual, he calls everyone by their potential and not their real names. But then he calls Callum by his real name. We were all shocked. I asked Callum why our teacher didn't call Callum potential murderer anymore. Callum told me that the reason our teacher doesn't call him potential murderer anymore is because it's not potential anymore, it's real. Callum actually murdered someone. He murdered some homeless man because he knew it will make the teacher call him by his real name. Callum then told me to take a bite out of the dead man by ripping some of his flesh out and cooking it, as it was the only way to make the teacher call me by my real name. I took a chunk out of the dead guy and he hadn't been dead for long. I cooked it and ate it. The next day for register, my teacher called me Joshua because I am not a potential cannibal anymore, but a real one. Man in the basement. When I was about 16, I was babysitting for a family friend. I took the girl, Maddie, outside to play on the swing set in the backyard, and it was getting pretty dark, around 8 or 8:30. I started getting a weird feeling, like we were being watched. I looked around and didn't see anyone, but I was still freaked out, so I took her inside since she had to go to bed soon anyway. I put her to sleep at around 9 and start watching TV in the living room. About 10 minutes later, I hear rustling outside the house. I stupidly go to check it out, and I don't see anything, so I just assume it was an animal and go back inside. About 20 minutes later, I hear footsteps from Maddie's room, so I go upstairs to put her back to bed. I open her door and see that she is still fast asleep in her bed. It's dark in the room, but I can see some stuff because of the light from the window. I look in the corner to see the shadowy silhouette kneeling in the corner. I immediately turn on the light to see an actual man there. He tries to run out the door, but I kick him in the nuts. I call the police, and it turns out the man had been living in the basement for about 6 months, going in and out through a hole in the side of the house, and he had been watching the family while they were outside and while they were sleeping. I haven't babysat since. I bought a reborn doll after I lost my baby. I think I made a grave mistake. My husband and I had been trying for a baby for the longest time. Yeah, I know you're probably going to laugh at that sentence. I've been married to Matthew for 3 years now. I've been trying to get pregnant for such a long time, but to no avail. My gynecologist told me that due to PCOS, my eggs haven't been able to mature properly, which has made conception more challenging. So when I noticed that I was feeling nauseous and my menstruation blood was nowhere to be seen, I took a test, and it's no surprise that I was happy. I did everything to make sure this baby came out of my womb healthy, and I mean everything. I have no idea where I failed, if it was even my fault. The doctors told me that the baby would be born sick from a congenital heart defect, and its chances of survival were low. They told me to abort it and save myself the trouble of going through the grief of your child dying and instead deal with the one of losing a fetus. But this wasn't just a fetus to me. This was my child. This might be my only chance to ever truly be a mother. I thought to myself. My mother had always wanted to be a grandmother, and I didn't want to disappoint her. Ever since I was a child, she'd tell me, "Wait until you see how it is to be a mother," and I can't wait for you to give me a grandchild." Well, why can't you just adopt? Some people would ask me, and the answer to that is I want to raise a child that has my own blood flowing through it. I have nothing against people that decide to adopt, but I just couldn't see myself doing that. Oh, how much I regret that now. Going into labor was one of the most difficult things I've gone through. Some women report not remembering what the pain felt like, or they straight up claim giving birth isn't as bad as some people make it out to be. That was far from the truth for me. I felt as if I was trying to push a rock out of my stomach through an opening that was not meant by nature to have a being that big pass through it. I felt as if I was being broken apart. My entire soul was torn open with a rusty knife with no analgesic and no mercy whatsoever. I decided to go the natural way too, so no C-sections. I really thought I knew better than my doctors who have had experience with women in my position for years and have paid thousands of dollars to get the education they have to be where they are. "Please make it stop. It hurts." Those were some of my words. "I want to go C-section, please." I begged them, but to no avail. "I'm sorry, miss, but it's too late for that." "Come on, you're almost there. We know you can do it," said one of the medical professionals. I was holding Matt's hand for dear life. I gripped it so tight to the point I knew I was hurting him. If I have to suffer this much, I'm sure he can deal with a little pressure. "Come on, sweetie. I know you can do it. You've come so far," said Mark. I know that he was trying to be supportive, but to me, he was just irritating at that moment. He wasn't the one that was being shredded into millions of pieces. Of course, I didn't want to tell him that because even at my worst, his sensitive butt was just going to be offended to the point where he wouldn't speak to me for days. I couldn't deal with his immaturity now, could I? After I was done birthing that monstrosity of a baby, they let me hold her. It was a baby girl. "Miracle," I said. "Her name is going to be Miracle." Its symbolic name meant a lot to me, and I hope it'll mean a lot to her too. After the countless doctors I had to go to throughout the last 3 years, and the time I was bringing her into this world, which felt like decades, I hope she appreciates her mother. The doctors put her in one of those incubators. I was made very well aware of the situation that she was going to be in and what her chances of survival were. Do you know what it was like when they told me the baby had died after a few hours of fighting for her life? All that effort and suffering, and for what? My heart was mercilessly shattered into countless, agonizing shards. I only got to hold her once for a few seconds before she was taken away from me forever. My beautiful Miracle, my baby. I'd opt for childbearing her 100 more times than this. Sometimes I even wondered if someone had physically torn my heart from her chest. Maybe she even did it. I do not know at this point. The doctors were right. I should have just aborted her. I would have spared myself and my entire family so much suffering. I was selfish to think I'd ever be a biological mother. I broke Matt now too, as well as my mother. She arrived at the hospital 10 minutes after her niece had died. She never even got to see her alive. My mother hasn't talked to me after that. She didn't even come to check on me. She probably thinks it's my fault. After we arrived home from the hospital, Matt's been doing his best to not show his sadness and to be strong and supportive, but I know it's there. I know it's there because every night I hear him leaving our bedroom to cry in the living room. I wish I could just go there, hug him, and tell him that everything is going to be okay, but I can't. I can't because I'm a mess myself, physically and emotionally, and I'm the reason he's there bailing his eyes out. It hurts so much to know what a horrible wife I've been. The funeral was a complete mess. I saw so many people crying there. The bastards didn't even know my child. They'd never even seen her, and yet they were shedding tears as if their child had died and not mine. It was a disgrace. It was impressive even. Their crocodile tears are unquestionable proof that if they'd pursued the media they would have become successful and famous in a quick time. So many of them were like, "I'm so sorry," and "I'm here for you," as if that were true. You know who didn't shed a single drop of tear? Me. Do you know why? Because I had other plans. Maybe I can't bring my child back, but what I can do is make a doll. In the funeral home, I demanded that they leave me alone with my child. They were highly against that, as me being alone would be too emotionally distressing for me. They were right. So many mothers complain because their children cry too much. What about my baby that's never going to let another sound come out of her mouth ever again? They are so ungrateful. They don't deserve their children. They don't know what it's like to lose a child, to lose a part of your soul. Part of my soul that I was going to bring back soon. When my baby was born, there was hair on her head. This is something that doesn't happen often, but I was fortunate enough as this gave me the chance to cut a little bit of her hair. Hair that I was going to put in the custom reborn I had ordered the day my baby was pronounced dead. Maybe the doll can't call me mama or cry or even move, but it was all that I had left. What else was I supposed to do? I can't just give birth to another child, and I still don't want to adopt. I can't get pregnant anyway, and plus I can't bear having it in my stomach, then going through the hell of giving birth to it just for it to die a few hours afterward. I paid $16,999 for that doll. Keep in mind that was all the money I had saved up since being together with Matt. If my husband was to leave me, I'd end up homeless, and I have no idea if I'd even be able to keep working at the office I am at right now. I hadn't waited for a package like ever since I was a child. I couldn't sleep, and the day of the estimated arrival I woke up at 5 a.m. I waited for a few more hours until I saw the man arrive with my order. I didn't even wait for him to enter our property. The moment I saw him through the window while I was pacing around the room like I was listening to music while I was maladaptive daydreaming, I ran out of the house to reach him. He probably thought I was crazy, getting out of the house, running toward him like a serial killer, but I don't care. I yanked the blue fancy box out of his hands, and I didn't even bother to really observe his facial expression, which I can only assume was pure weirded out. I tore the packaging like a tiger tearing apart its prey, and the delivery guy just left, praying that I don't go after him next in case I didn't get what I was expecting. Luckily for me, the reborn was beyond perfect. It was an exact replica of my deceased child that I wasn't given enough of the opportunity to really appreciate. Its eyes were open, as that was my exact request. Hence I wanted to be able to stare at its dark hazel eyes for as long as I am walking this very earth. Its hands were so small, and its cheeks were full of adorable. My eyes filled up with tears, but not out of sadness, instead of complete happiness. Now it's not the time to cry, I thought to myself. You finally have your baby back. Call me crazy all you want. The moment I held that doll in my hands, all of the sadness, pain, and grief faded away. The only thing I wondered is how would Matt react once he saw her. I was scared at this point. I spent a ton of money on her, and I doubt that he'd like that. I guess I'm just going to have to lie to him, as it's my money after all. He has no idea how much or how little I had in the first place. I went on through the entire day just staring deeply into her eyes while I was rocking her, swinging on my rocking chair. That's a funny set of words. When Matt came from work, he was shocked to see me in the living room with a baby in my hands. I guess he was expecting to see me just lying in my bedroom like usual, doing nothing but rotting away, and that is why he didn't even greet me properly and instead just asked, "H honey, W what are you holding?" I looked at him, pretending I hadn't heard the front door open. "Oh, hey sweetheart, you're back. This is just a reborn," I said. He approached us, and the look on his face when he saw an exact replica of his daughter was priceless. His eyes widened, and his mouth opened like he had seen a ghost. "Sweetie, that looks exactly like our bee baby," he stuttered, clearly freaked out by the figure he was seeing. "I know. I mean she cost $17,000 for a reason," I said with a smile as I moved my head upwards to look at my husband's gorgeous face. $17,000. What the fuck? You gave $17,000 for what, Matt? For our daughter. Sweetie, That that isn't our daughter. That's just a doll. We had a rather big argument. I didn't want my baby to wake up because of him, so I just straight up ran to our bedroom, silently crying. I knew that he wouldn't understand. He barely ever does. I heard him leave through the front door. I wonder where he was going this time. I tried calling my mom for some emotional support, or I have no idea what, but my calls were never answered. I wonder why. A few days had gone by, and nothing was heard from either my mom nor my husband. That is until I heard that on the news there were two car accidents. Two vehicles collided in a dramatic crash at the intersection of Willow Street and Pine Avenue, a serene locale in the heart of Oakwood Heights. The incident took a sinister turn as investigators discovered the numbers 69 and 99 scrawled in blood on the road near the wreckage, raising suspicions of foul play. Tragically, both vehicles erupted in flames, resulting in the horrific deaths of the occupants, leaving the community in shock. Authorities are now urgently probing whether this was a deliberate act, leaving the town with unsettling questions about a potentially larger, more sinister motive behind the incident. I looked down at the doll in my hands again. There was a smile on its face. It did not arrive that way. I hate my new job. I really hate my new job. I got accepted 2 weeks ago. The first week was completely fine, but there was still something off. I don't know if it was only me, but I seemed to be very unlucky. On my first day of work, I dropped a cup of coffee over my hand, which gave me some scalding on my arm. My coworkers just laughed. They weren't concerned about my injuries, they just laughed. The other days were becoming worse and worse. My PC wouldn't turn on anymore, which caused my boss to be mad at me. I accidentally stabbed myself cleaning a kitchen knife and all other sorts of things where other people would probably be worried with what's going on. But my coworkers didn't care. They were laughing all together. Today everything seems to be much more quiet. I accidentally dropped my lunchbox today, but no one said anything, and most importantly, no one laughed. But even when I had questions, they didn't answer. I kept on working on my own, but after I was done with the emails I usually work on, I went to my boss and asked him if there was anything I can do now. No reply, he just sat there, motionlessly. They all really seemed to be into their work today. I continued looking for other things I could work on until it was finally 4 p.m., the end of my work day. It was starting to get real weird. I'm usually the last one to leave, but everyone was still here, working without having said a word for the whole day. I shake my head, pack my bags, and say goodbye to everyone. Since I don't expect a reply, I walk out of the building before anyone would even be able to say anything. On my way home, I think to myself that I maybe did go too hard on them. I mean, who knew that cutting through people's vocal cords would make them go this quiet? I just hope that they interact a bit more with me tomorrow. I mean, this is just the beginning. Not my wife. I try to brush it off. How did you sleep, honey? Shut up. Shut the hell up. He throws his phone at the wall just above my head. I stiffen. You don't even sound like her. You don't move like her. I know a fucking demon when I see one. When he first decided to go back to seminary school, I supported him. He'd never been all that religious until he gave up alcohol. I was just so happy that he'd quit drinking. His evangelizing caused a bigger and bigger rift between us and our friends and family. I started to feel trapped with him and constantly judged by him, reminded over and over again what my roles as a wife were, according to the word of the Lord our God. We had no kids together. I had family a few hours away I could stay with. It just made sense for me to leave. So, about 2 years into his evangelical theology program, I informed him that I wanted to separate. He took it surprisingly well. I thought this would be a smooth, amicable divorce. Then the seizures started. I'd had them on and off since around when I got married. My GP Half a dozen nurses and a neurologist were all baffled as to where they came from. Eventually, it was chalked up to stress, probably, and I was prescribed anticonvulsants and sedatives. But Michael hadn't let me leave the house to pick up my medication. He had long since stopped taking his own "Christ heals all ills," and to trust the invention of man over the Creator himself is sinful. In fact, Michael hadn't let me leave the house at all in weeks. He left the house claiming to seek a doctor for a home visit and came back with an exorcist. For 6 days I was tied to a bed and denied food to starve the demon out. I had a burning piece of firewood held to my face to scare the demon out. I was bound and helpless as they poured foul-tasting tinctures into my pried open mouth, brewed with holy water and herbs thought to be demon-repelling. After those 6 days the exorcist left. I looked at him with pleading eyes, begging him without speaking to go to the police. After a few words with Michael, the man left, and I was again at the mercy of my overzealous husband. And now said husband is staring at me with the eyes of a lunatic, wild, primal, and bloodthirsty, as though he were facing the devil itself. Michael, please baby, please believe me. I'm so desperate at this point that I don't consider the hundreds of times I've begged before, or how it just made him angrier. Michael, I am your wife. I'm Bridget. I married you in my father's backyard on March 15, 1995. I design clothing. I love my husband Michael dearly and I am his wife, Bridget. Please baby, just let me go, I choke, not realizing I had started to cry. He opens a large glass bottle and walks over to me. I brace myself for another noxious tincture, but he appends the bottle and pours the strong-smelling clear liquid all over my body. Alcohol. It is by the Spirit of God that I cast out the demons, he recites as he pulls out a matchbook. I open my mouth to scream, and he shoves a rag in my mouth, silencing me. Then the kingdom of God shall come upon you. He lights a match. Our eyes meet. In that look, I can see the truth. Nobody else will, and nobody else would have had I tried to explain. By all outside accounts, my husband is a madman who murdered his wife by accident, believing her to be a demon. But in that last look, the last time I met my husband's eyes, mine asked a question. As I looked into the crazed, enraged eyes of my killer, I silently asked, "It's all been you, hasn't it? These seizures, this demon, all because I want to leave?" With the slightest of nods, he drops the match. This story is inspired by, in memory of, and dedicated to Bridget Cleary née Boland, who was murdered by her husband Mitchell Cleary on March 15, 1895, allegedly because he believed she had been replaced by a changeling. Bridget was 26 years old when she died.